Cool. So hi everyone, and welcome to our next session of today's instalment of Interact Virtual Festival. This talk is from Chui Chui Tan with her talk, Understanding Your Global Customers to Grow and Thrive in Different Markets. Chui is founder of Bayo Global, a culturalization strategist and customer experience consultant. And this talk will challenge businesses to think from a different perspective by asking one key question. How do you fully understand what your global customers need and want? If you've got any questions for Chui, please use the Q&A box and I'll try to get through as many as I can at the end. Please do say hello to each other in the chat function. And if there's any issues with audio or anything like that, please let us know there too. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Chui to begin.
Thank you. Thanks, Henry. Thanks for having me, and thanks for everyone who logged in. I can't see you guys, so hello. So a bit about myself. So in the course of being in the UX and culturalization industry for the last 15 years, I've authored international user research, a pocket book. I'm also a editor of Force Machine magazine, and also I'm running Bayo Global, like Henry was talking about. And my global aim is for some reason, it doesn't show again. Henry, I'm going to switch to.
Cool. No problem. You did say.
Can I switch to the other preview actually? Because I'm going to stop sharing. And then I'm going to choose this one. Yeah, I had an issue with my keynotes for some reason. So here we go again. So my ultimate aim is normally to empower businesses so that they can offer best experience to their customers and reach out to their customers regardless where they are in the world. Because a good experience for British might not be a good one for Germans or Russians or Japanese. So these are the photos I took when I was traveling in different locations to observe and understand and talk to people in these countries to understand how things work in the society and how they behave and what they need and what their mentalities and attitudes are towards different aspects and so on. So you can probably tell like how much I miss my travels to kind of see the world. Having said that, despite travels no longer possible at the moment, but there are still a lot of different ways we can be close to our the people in different parts of the country, in different part of the world, and understand what is important to them. So this is one of the things I want to focus on today and cover in the talk. So what I help companies to define their propositions and global strategies for different markets. The objectives of my support for them often varied. So for example, working with Spotify in the last 3 years across 17 countries, I work with their growth team, their products team, their marketing team, new market teams, and also a premium subscription team for both consumer and also creator side. And the objectives often range from defining new product ideas or identify plans for new market before their launch, or to explore different subscriptions model or payment methods, or to define their marketing strategy for different markets. So I wanted to start the talk by talking about David Attenborough's documentary about Galapagos Islands. I don't know whether you guys already seen it. If not, I would strongly recommend that. So the Galapagos Islands, situated near the equator of the South America, it was more than 500 miles from the coast of mainland Ecuador. And it is the best, and it was, and it is still the best in the world to study evidence of evolutions by natural selection. This is because the island is so isolated, so any plants and animals that actually washed away from the land and drifted to the island will will be kind of start to go through a unique evolution pathway because they can't be mixing with or breeding with others of their kind. So with nowhere to go, the Galapagos species will have to adapt to the conditions, which is very, very unique to their new homes. So if we take the penguins, my favorite animals, Galapagos penguins as an example. So the closest living relative of Galapagos penguin is the Magellanic penguin. It was believed that ages ago, some penguins were carried from southern Chile by storm or ocean's current and then arrived in Galapagos. And somehow these cold weather birds survived and they multiplied. So to adapt to a new environment, the Galapagos penguins have lost some of their fat and evolved to become smaller as a tactic to keep them cool. They also have hairless spots on the cheeks, and so it will help to release the heat as well. The adaptation is not just on the physical appearance, but also have also developed their behavioral adaptations to keep them cool. So for example, standing with their flippers extended to aid the heat loss, or they also release heat through their webbed feet. So like all the animals and species, humans also have adapted to different climate, to different altitude, to different resources available around our environment. So our body and gene, physical features, everything adapt throughout centuries, mostly depending on the environment and the ancestor we're in. So you might ask, what does evolution theory have to do with your global customers and your business? So how do all these physical differences of your global customers will impact your business decisions so that you can provide a good customer experience to them? So it can be of different levels. So let's start with physical products that you're offering in different countries. So have you considered that maybe an ergonomically comfortable sofa or chair you have designed for Western customers might not stay true anymore for your Asian customers because they have a different body size, different body proportions, and leg to body ratios. Or when it comes to your shop display, it might make sense to showcase your product at a lower height. So for some countries, considering that on average, your key customer in those countries are shorter. This is exactly what IKEA have been doing in India, where they have their cabinets and countertops come at lower heights because Indian women tend to be shorter than Europeans and Americans. So I'm pretty sure you guys heard of this, even yourself might have said this, like Asia is a few years behind the West, or this country is behind the other country. And it feels like one country has to be falling behind and the other country has to be catching up. So we often make such comparison and conclusion about country in terms of their infrastructure, their technology, their education level, economy. And it seems like always the case where one country has to lead and the other one have to catch up. And this sounds a bit like human evolution, isn't it? So I believe you are all aware and familiar with this linear human evolutions, where everyone starts with apes, big jaws, and then we end up with where we are now, the modern man. Very straightforward. And you start simple and then you end advanced. But the truth is, the evolution is not like this. It is more, this is the real evolution. So no one is advanced. Chimpanzee is living alongside with human and spider monkey, and all exist together in the planet. And it all started with one base and then evolved differently throughout the centuries based on the environment, the niche. And then some species might grow and survive and grow very well, and some might die out along the way. So no one is behind anyone. So we all evolve very differently. Our culture evolves differently. Our habit evolves differently. Our behaviors evolve differently. So that also makes our expectations and needs and motivations on certain products or services evolve differently as well. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's just a unique way. So take example of M-Pesa. I'm sure some of you might have already know about this. So it's a mobile payment, very, very successful in Kenya. If you're in Kenya and you don't have M-Pesa set up, you're not going to go anywhere further in the market. So the reason M-Pesa is very successful in Kenya is because it works within its environment, and its context. So first of all, is because there's a low percentage of Kenyans have bank account due to poverty and also limited access to banks. But then the country has a very, very high penetration of mobile devices. So on top of that, the presence of one single dominant mobile carrier, which is Safaricom, it makes it easier for the offering to be adopted in a faster pace, because ultimately people want to use what everyone else is using, the snowball effect. And also, Kenya is a collectivist society, so social support is very important. Without a bank account, the urban Kenyans had difficulties in transferring money to support their relatives or family in rural areas. So M-Pesa solved this problem by allowing them to deposit, to withdraw, to transfer money, just based on a basic mobile devices. So it also helps to decrease corruptions and the chances of being robbed as well, because everything is on the phone. So the success of M-Pesa in Kenya is not by luck or a coincidence. It's exactly what Kenyans need. It solves the problems they're having. It works for their specific environment and infrastructure setup. So it fits into their ecosystem. So to duplicate the same solutions in other countries with different setup or problems to solve, it won't work. So unless you cannot duplicate every single of these elements that we talk about in another country, replicating the exact technology or solutions into another markets without in-depth understanding or research is certainly not a wise strategy. So stop the catching up and following games, find the right fits instead. So don't try to imitate solutions. It works in one country and trying to apply on another country. But most useful things to do is to understand the niche, such as their context, background, beliefs, history, and then use this aspect to define a society attitudes and needs and challenges. This doesn't apply only on payment methods, for example, but also on other sectors. Always think about variational evolution rather than transformational evolutions. So let's switch gear a little. Let's talk about the pandemic, since everyone's talking about it and it feels like every talk have to talk about the pandemic now. So we are now living through an unprecedented period, so full of unknowns. While many of us are trying to speculate and predict what the changes in different aspects might be, and a lot of businesses are trying to work out the direction of their industries and trying to head towards the same directions and prepare for all the changes. But since the pandemic starts like March, April onwards, we are bombarded by surveys after surveys, opinions after opinions, and articles after articles about how consumer behaviors is going to change. It's all good to predict and to kind of prepare for it. But the truth is, none of us have lived through anything like this before. So no one can be certain what exactly will happen next. So yes, certain things will change, but in what way will it change? And what does it mean to your business? And it all feels very overwhelming and complicated. It's even so when it comes to planning and changing strategies for your global market, when it involves different culture, politics settings, infrastructure setup, and so on and so on. We can already see a lot of differences in how people in different countries respond to the pandemic and how they react to their government decisions. For example, in Asia, it's very much they quite comply to what the government have said, like we lock down, we kind of quarantine. It's a bit different from what we have in the West. It's more kind of like challenging some decisions being made. And businesses are wondering what they should do with their business in different market. So what would the changes in customers or consumers' behaviors needs to be for their industry? So, and how much of the changes shared globally, and what are the ones that only apply to certain markets? So with so many whats and who's and hows, where do you even start? So I would very much encourage businesses to use a different approach to managing your global markets and customers. So instead of trying to predict what the behavior change would be for different countries, and then trying to figure out what you can do to keep up with those changes, I would really recommend or suggest and encourage you to focus on what wouldn't change or what are unlikely to change. Similar advice that Jeff Bezos have been given the same advice several times over the last 20 years to entrepreneurs looking to stay ahead of fast changing world. So he's talking about being asked a lot of questions about what changed in the future and everything. He said the questions you have to ask is what is not going to change in the next 10 years. So his reason was that predicting the future is hard, whereas what is unlikely to change are obvious, is big, and is fundamental. So once you identify what they are, you will be in much more secure positions and place to craft a strategy for your business. You can be more confident that the efforts you put into them will still be beneficial and benefits and giving you more sales and profits in 10 years from now. This is especially true when it comes to culturalizations. Whether or not you're growing or planning to launch into new region or new market, you can still confidently develop your strategy without needing to know what the future holds by looking into what definitely won't change and understanding what are the fundamental things that are very unlikely to change for each market. So how do we know what is not going to change? So regardless of what happened to the world or country, revolutions, a pandemic, a natural disaster, there are always elements that won't change when you're designing or building a product and service for customers in different countries. It starts with the first level of culturalizations, the fundamental. So I created this 3-level culturalization. The first one is the fundamental. What is the fundamental? Let's take a look at these brands, for example. They all made a similar mistake between 2018 and 2019. So they all face a backlash in China over political sensitivities. So their employee have given a presentation in China, showed a map of China that did not include Taiwan. Valentino and Calvin Klein, they listed Hong Kong and Taiwan as separate regions from China on their website. McDonald's, they show an advert in Taiwan that included only 2-second clips of a student ID card being that show Taiwan as a country. And Marriott, they listed Tibet, Macau, Hong Kong, and Taiwan as separate countries in their customers questionnaire and survey run by their agency that they employed. So you get the gist. These are the geopolitical mistakes that a brand and company should know about and be aware of. Then you have the other type of mistake which are offensive to different regions. So during Ramadan in 2015, Tesco faced accusations of cultural insensitivity after they offer bacon-flavored Pringles as part of their Ramadan promotions. And the crisps were positioned under a Ramadan banner when the consumption of pork products is strictly forbidden in Islam. And then if you play games, if you have ever played Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 and 3, although they didn't get banned, but complaints were received after players in the Middle East noticed that in the bathroom of one of their popular level, there's a picture frame carrying Islamic text, which translated in English to Allah is beautiful and he loves beauty. In the Islamic religion, though, it is forbidden for Muslims to utter Allah's name in the toilet or carry books or papers with their names written on them. So having the Islamic text in the bathroom showed disrespect of the religion and the traditions of Muslim gamers. So the publisher quickly apologized and removed the texture from the games before any further damage being done. So let's take something closer to the home. So take icon designs. So if you're asked to design an icon to present Chinese cuisine with chopstick and a bowl, how many of you might draw something like this? they're pretty obvious, right? Bowl and chopstick, how can it get wrong? But in fact, one of these icon design was used in one of my clients' website in China market. And sadly, little did they know that having chopstick in the bowl, especially when you have it standing straight directly from the bowl or rice, it is representing serving food to the dead people or to spirits around us in most Asian culture. So it was upsetting and probably a bit offensive to the Asian and especially Chinese customers. So these are just some examples of bare minimum that you have to get it right when it comes to designing for audiences in different culture. Geopolitically insensitivity, cultural insensitivity, or religious insensitivity. So getting it wrong will bring you down and bring the business down easily. But most importantly, these are the elements that wouldn't easily change. So it's not going to change during or after the pandemic that we are going to go through. The second level in the level of culturalization is the basic. Let's start with language. Very often we hear that people are commenting that, oh, we are in different countries. Oh, yeah, we do localization. What they normally mean is to translate the content into local languages. There are much more things than localization or culturalization has to be involved apart from the language. But let's just stick with the language itself first. So when your content is being translated, they have to be translated accurately in the right context. So having translation which are not done properly could backfire you because it gives your customer a different impression that you actually don't care about them. You don't want to put enough money or effort into making it right. And the site is not localized and it doesn't feel like the site is properly localized and it's not professional. We recently conducted a series of research in Spain and France, and next is to Germany and the Netherlands. And the business is trying their best to provide localized content, which means local languages. The nature of their business means 85 to 90% of their content are user-generated content. Most of their content, though, especially this user-generated content, were automatically translated by AWS, Amazon, and translate neural machine translation. Just like Google Translate, they are good, but they are not perfect, as we all know. So the inaccurate translation have a big negative impact on how French participants specifically perceive the brand and the site. Language is really important in that country. So some of them trusted their own not so good English more than the French translated content. And the whole experience was affected. It's not French enough and not professional. They don't care much. So a lot of this coming back. You might be thinking, okay, that's language. How about naming? So naming, how complicated it can be to design, right? But there's so many different considerations. First of all, the order. So like a lot of Asian countries and some European countries like Hungary and Russia, family names always comes before first name. Therefore, make sure you have the fields in the right order to avoid confusions. People don't always read the phone, so you might capture the wrong informations and you might be addressing them in the wrong way. And secondly, middle names. A lot of countries actually don't have a middle name. So you might want to consider removing them so that it's not confusing. And then length, some countries have a very long name. So it's a worst case scenario is that not being able to display everything they're typing in one go in the field. And then you have symbols because a lot of names in different countries like Brazilians in Spanish, you have hyphens and different names. So your field needs to allow that. Don't say, please input a valid name because that is really their name. And then you have space, like my name, I have Chui space Tan. And Chui Chui is actually my first name, but living in the UK for 17 years is like still get a lot of times I was being referred by Chui Tan because the businesses just assume the space after the space, the second tree is my middle name. So it's kind of things like that. You need to be careful about that. Some customers will be more critical about these things than others. And then the other things, you have numbers, you think it's easy to design, you have numeric and they're easy to design. What are the other things that you should consider? And then you have dates and display as well. So all these things you thought is a small things, but actually small details can have a very, very big impact to you, to your business and profit as well. So that's why I'm currently in the process of creating a series of design guides for different countries, which will cover all these important elements that you can see on the slide. So I'm about to launch it in a few weeks. Started with China and Japan. So if you want to be notified when they're available, go to this link and then put your email address. I'll keep you updated. If once we launch, we'll let you know. And let me know as well what other countries you would like to access most, so I can prioritize them when I create the next guide. Right. So that is basic. So now those are the two layers we are pretty sure it's not going to change, the fundamental and the basic. So no matter what happened, it's very, very, very unlikely they will change. Now it comes to the third layers, the detailed. So this layer is slightly complex, but also the most interesting one. So you might ask, will behaviors and needs change? My answer is yes and no. Because with new technology being introduced and developed, we see people's needs and certain behaviors will change throughout the years. And throughout the pandemic, sure, things will change because what we focus on might be different because of the limitations of what we can do is changing. But it's also fair to say that the behavior and attitudes for some countries might change faster than others. So for example, from my experience, like some countries like Russia or Saudi Arabia might change faster due to certain elements. However, one important thing to remember is whether, even when that happens, when things slightly change, the fundamental mentality and culture of a country are not likely to change. For example, the characteristic of a society being a highly collectivist society or hierarchical or family-oriented, those are examples of elements that is very unlikely to change across centuries. So very often these are also the underlying values and factors that influence how people in different countries behaves, needs and expects. So instead of trying to speculate what changes might happen, it is more useful to focus on the fundamental aspect that will unlikely to change. I started to write a series of cultural snippets since March when the global travel started to pause. So my initial thought was to write this series was to bring the world to you when travels were not possible. I also wanted to share some of my knowledge that I know about all these different markets and to demonstrate how companies need to have a holistic view and understanding of a country. Understanding of its society, understanding of the people, so they can serve better their global customer better. So some of this insight, which I shared as a snippet, is actually all in 1,300 words because I want to fit within LinkedIn, so it's quite compact for each snippet. But some of the insight that I share within these snippets are examples of what the fundamental aspect that I talked about earlier, which are less likely to change. So for example, take the Philippines as example. So in the Philippines, the getting the most out of what I have paid, that mentality is very strong. There's a local term called ayaw malugi, means I don't want to feel like I'm cheated. So this actually leads to a culture called the tingi culture, means that you can buy things in a small amount. So you can buy cooking oil by the cup, you can buy cigarette by sticks, you can buy shampoo by the sachet, or you can buy garlics in a pack of 4 cloves only. So locals will want to only buy the things they need so that they will get the most out of what they have paid. It was also seen as an affordable solution, which they actually carried forward from many years ago. But even with that, wealthy consumers now also simply buy multiple sachets, even though they can afford now, because this has become a habitual and familiar behavior to them. So these kind of behaviors and also mentality is very unlikely to change, for example, throughout this pandemic. And then the second example that I want to talk about is the South Korea. So they have the Bali Bali culture, which is fast or hurry up or quickly. So it is embedded very deeply in South Korean daily and working life. So the practice of this culture is why the nation was able to achieve tremendous economic process in a very short period of time after their 3-year Korean War. The focus on speed is not only led to its world-leading internet speeds and high-tech gadgets like we all know now about South Korea, but also it influenced the high efficiency of their public transport and other services. So these are the things that you know is embedded with them, and then it actually will influence their behavior in certain things, in certain elements that might relate to your industry and your business. To make sure that you have a complete view and understanding about your global customers and markets, you need to think about it in a holistic sense. So having a holistic approach towards your understanding for your customer is a bit like, for example, if you want to create a useful, applicable, and sustainable healthcare digital solutions for the locals in African countries. Don't just learn about their living and social conditions, but also how their medical system work currently, and their technology available and limitations, their traditions and beliefs, also their history, for example, how it shapes how they see and talk about certain health conditions and diseases and so on. So you need to get the full picture, and most importantly, the complete ecosystem. So it's important to identify what aspect to look into, whether it's history, politics, and different elements, and then link the one which is really important and relevant to your industry and your business. So for example, when I was in Japan for Asana, a management work management tool, we learned that in Japan, there are 2 different types of companies in Japan, right? They have traditional Japanese companies, and you have a startup venture companies. So the formal is very much hierarchical and strict with formal approval process, where everyone's role is clearly defined and they stay within the jobs that they have defined. So for those who work in a more traditional Japanese company, it involves a lot of formality in terms of how they communicate and and all the processes. So for example, it is not right for people to just assign tasks or jobs via tools straight away, because it's important to have the courtesy chat with your colleagues. And you need to know whether this person's about the workloads of this person before you're assigning tasks to them, because you don't want to overload them. And you want to make sure they are feeling comfortable and have the skills to kind of work on the tasks that you are going to give them. So it's kind of a very much a respectful way for them to communicate. So a tools that say, oh, you can assign a job to this person, that person, is kind of, there's another level needs to be added on top of that. And also a consensus needs to be reached before a decision is being made as well. But on the same trip, I was also with Spotify, and it was but this time it's different. So we were there to understand how to convert physical experience to a good digital experience. This is just part of the objective we are trying to figure out. Because in Japan, it was still very common to buy CDs, and it is actually legal to go to stores or libraries to rent an album for probably around £1.80, roughly converted. And you can just download it and then return it once you're done. So we needed to understand why physical experience is important due to their cultural background. So it's nothing to do with hierarchical or making decisions or assigning tasks. What we're looking here is very much related and completely very much based on the products and services and experience we were trying to solve. So the same company, the same countries, but look into different relevant elements and aspects. So before you make any of those decisions on how to grow your global reach or how to spend more time on your marketing strategy in different countries, it's actually crucial to make sure that you have the view and picture you have about your customer in different countries and background or context. And then you can see them as a whole, as accurate and as complete as possible. Why is that important? Because if you solely look at the collected data or very limited information or stereotype or assumptions that you made, there's always an underlying risk that you either will only address the obvious or miss out the opportunity to be innovative. But you also might be addressing and focusing on the wrong things because what you think you know might not be accurately represented the full truth. So your insight might be misinterpreted due to the insufficient data you have. So let's use this metaphor to describe this holistic concept. Let's say you're trying to understand the market and customer, and your market and your customer is the end picture of this puzzle set. So the more puzzle set you put together, the more details you can see and the more complete understanding you have about them. But the difference is in the normal puzzle sets we have, you have a box, the cover of the box to say, oh, this is the end picture. But in this case, you don't have that end picture to be referenced to. So you need to start putting the pieces together and start to figure out, oh, what does that mean? What is this puzzle trying to say? And so on. So if you have very little resources, you to paint each single small piece of puzzle you put together. So you might be painting incorrect details to the puzzle pieces. Or you might only see a fraction of the full picture, which might not represent the full story. So there's definitely a risk on that. So as an example, alongside with my client at Babylon Health, the digital healthcare company, we spent a week and a half with my client to visit HIV, TB, and mental health patients in Kenya and Rwanda and in their homes. At their homes, and we talked to them, we talked to medical people, and to understand their patient journey and to understand their use of mobile phones, the support they're currently getting or not getting, the challenges they're having, and so on. So one of the things we learned from them is that there's a support groups that they are encouraged to go to. But in this support group, each person have to contribute a specific amount of money each time they meet. The money will then be either given to one of the person in the group, which might need more money than the others, or they will create a project they can all take part, for example, buying materials for sewing activities that they can all do together. However, this sometimes could be one of the reasons that the patients stop going as well because they can't afford to contribute. So these stories and insights are good. We understand their motivations of going or not going to a support group, which often is beneficial for them to go and because that manage their conditions better. But it's unclear to us like why it is common for support groups in this country to collect money within the group informally, not as a fee, but to help out. So this is not something any of the participants can tell us why the reason. It's not until I start to dig deeper into the history, politics, and culture of the country, I discovered the root of this behavior. It's called the Harambee culture. So Harambee means to pull together, the spirit of self-help amongst Kenyans. So it was popularizing in Kenya immediately after independence by its first president as a strategy to pull the country together to build a nation. So this means believing in mutual responsibility is what Kenyans are familiar with because the government can't do everything to build a nation. So they need people to kind of help each other to build the nation together. So it's very common for individuals to voluntarily contribute their resources like cost or labors and towards communal good. So this Harambee spirit is why Chama is popular in Kenya. So Chamas is an informal cooperative self-help micro-saving group. So it's a way for communities to pull resources, investment, friendship, everything together to grow economically and possibly to achieve financial independence. So all of this background insights or deeper why give us the full story, the holistic view of what we hear and observe during the user research. It's not something the participant would or could tell us. It's not because they refuse to, but because they might not even know the things that they have been doing as a norm. They're familiar with is the nuances that we would like to pick out because they're unique, because it could impact or give the directions of our design and how we're going to serve them in a better way. But more importantly, is they didn't tell us is very likely because they themselves do not know these relevant triggers, that they couldn't relate, say, oh, that's because our country start on this year and that year, and this is what happened. That's why we now behave like this and that. Because us human wouldn't have known what is familiar to us. Sometimes we wouldn't be able to track back what the cause of it. So this is where we cultural experts comes in. Even if you are in B2B business, you're still dealing with people within the organization, either individual or team. So an organization is formed by people. The organization itself has no emotions, but the people who you're dealing with, who form the organization, like your board members, stakeholders, senior stakeholders, or employees, they are the people who have emotion. And the organization itself does not make the decision, but the people within the organization do as well. And also, even your B2B, you still have the end users to think of, because if that end users that you didn't cater their needs and everything, the B that you are serving is not going to needing your products better, or needing what you're serving is not going to help them to serve better to their customers. So yeah, everything is not just like B2B and B2C is different. Ultimately, we are still serving people, and we are still trying to create experience that is good for people, whether within organizations or as a group. And applying the holistic approach to your global strategies does also include your internal operations. So like I mentioned very beginning, like when I work with clients, I help them the strategy very different from one to another. Sometimes it could be product, partnership, brand, monetization, all very different. That means each team play their own roles as well. But internationalization and culturalization touches all aspects of the business, from branding to products to design to marketing to proposition. So you need to make sure it's all linked together. Your marketing strategy needs to be aligned with your product roadmap. Roadmap needs to align with your partnership strategy. Your partnership strategy need to consider your business proposition for a market. You get the idea. So the holistic approach is understanding the deeper levels of underlying cultural components and factors. So having this unchanged, strong base, unshakable underlying cultural insights, you'll be clear on your business essentials, priorities. So this will help you to avoid running around like chicken with your head cut off and trying to figure, oh, what should we change, and throughout this whole pandemic. So I hope this talk is insightful. But what I would like you to do maybe is after this talk and this evening or tomorrow morning, have a cup of tea or coffee, and then have a think like, what do you know? What do you think you know or your organization know and might not know about your customer in different markets, and what your team and your organization could do better in serving them? So if you like, send me any thoughts and we can jump on like 20 minutes call to chat more. Thank you.
Cool, thank you so much. There's so much to think about there. If anyone has any questions, please let us know in the Q&A box. I mean, I'll be quite interested to know, like, do you ever find there's any kind of regional cultural differences kind of in a country that can kind of like be a kind of hidden pitfall, and how kind of would you mitigate that? Sorry,
I missed your question. Can you ask that again, Henry?
Sorry, so when you have a kind of like a national strategy for a different country, do you ever find within that country there are different cultural differences, kind of regionally, that you have to think about?
You mean regionally, not just as a country specific, but as a region? So yeah, it's right. But a lot of time people were thinking, okay, region could be continents, could be Asia as a whole, or could be Europe as a whole as such, and you kind of group them in different ways. But it's interesting, sometimes a lot of different aspects that I talked about earlier, like some of the behaviorals or mentality, it could share between Asia and Latin America in certain aspects, like the whole family oriented and collectivist society and kind of thing. But then you can share between one region to the other regions, but then in certain elements, but then when it comes to other elements, it might change again, like Europe and France might share as it with Malaysia to certain aspects. So I think grouping regions sometimes could be quite risky if the industry you're in is a bit different in terms of how people view things. So yeah, I think it's kind of again, it's kind of step back to say, okay, what is the similarities and differences between different countries, and then say, okay, we can group these countries together because they share similar things. So for example, you might group Malaysia and the UK in the terms of grocery shopping if you are a grocery company, but you wouldn't group those two together for insurance mentality, maybe, because the insurance mentality is very different from the two countries.
Awesome, thank you. And we have Joey asks, he says, great talk. And what were the questions you said that we should think about our customers? I tried to write them down.
Sorry, what is the questions that we?
Yeah, what were the questions you said that we should think about our customers? I'm not sure. If you want to clarify that, Joey, that would be great.
Maybe he can clarify while you ask another question, and we can come back to Joey.
Yeah. Oh, the questions you said right at the end when mulling over a cup of tea.
Oh, okay. So I was saying that maybe it's worthwhile to step back and kind of reflect on, because quite a lot I kind of squeeze in over time as well. So apologize to that. And so it's kind of like step back and say, okay, what does that mean to my business or organization or myself, like serving the people I have in different countries? Like, do you think how much do you think you know about your customers, and how much you don't think you know about your customer in different countries? And what are the things you kind of like foreseen that you and your organization could do to serve them better? And I'm happy to kind of throw ideas. They can throw ideas, and I'm happy to have a chat, like jump on, email me, and then we can kind of follow up on that.
Awesome, thank you. Bikash asks, when we're learning about the culture of a particular country, what should be our approach during the current pandemic?
Yeah, so the one of the way that we always say, oh, I talk about traveling and have photos of traveling, but yeah, since pandemic I haven't traveled at all, and I'm starting to get very itchy feet as well. But like companies still continue trying to understand their customers. So there are a lot of different ways of doing that. So the most obvious one is remote research. So you can still run remote research with your participants, although there's more things to consider because of because you need to make sure the quality internet connections and things like that. So there are more things to be aware of to run remote, but it could easily done. And then other thing is, like, sometimes it's also good to just step back and say, okay, how much do I actually know about the customer? Because you might already have some data or insights from different different sources that is worthwhile. These are the things that I sometimes work with clients to say, before we kind of do anything, let me help you to kind of digest what you have and find out the gaps that you don't know already, or you know, but it's a hypothesis, and how we validate that, and then identify the things that we don't know. And then with that, then you can use different approach. Like you can approach the users, you can have diaries, you can have survey, and you can have, like the one that I did with the clients on kind of expert insights to kind of complement other data that you have already as well. So yeah, there are a lot of different ways you still can understand your customers without having to travel. Because ultimately the pandemic is just stopping us for traveling, and other things is still ongoing as well. So yeah, as long as we kind of solve the travel issues, everything was still is still possible to get in touch with them and be close with your customers.
Awesome. No, thank you so much for such an interesting presentation. We have one more question just popped up actually. Any recommended resources for reliable information on the different cultures in the world?
Yeah, I kept being asked these questions, and unfortunately there's not. Because everyone is trying to write something, and even because the world is so big, even if I want to cover even I want to cover one country, there are so many elements to cover as well. So if let's say I want to cover Japan or China, and I want to write a resource about this country, it's very, very, like I mentioned earlier, it's very much to do with your industry as well. Specific information is important to your industry, but not to others, like the Asana and Spotify elements. So that is why I don't think there's anyone could be able to afford to put all those together as a global strategy. You can find things here and there about, oh, this country and that country, or, you know, like local teams trying to write something about their country from their own local perspective. But sometimes having the global perspective is even more important, because as much as you can work with the local team, they might not see some important elements that normal to them, but it's very important to us that we as a global view can see that, to capture that. So yeah, that's why I have been trying to, so I start off with a design guide, because it's a way at least to kind of capture the important things for one country first. So when you design, you know, these are elements that you need to work out, like the fonts and formats and things like that. That is my attempt to first kind of introduce the more solid resource somewhere. But the behavioral ones, yeah, I have been coming up ideas to write it, and I just always kind of how to package it better, and it's a bit difficult. Yeah, so yeah, the short answer is no. The long answer is that there are a lot everywhere, so you just need to know how to find them and validate them as well, because it's easy for people to write, and that is probably their opinion. So you need to validate what other people write is the right thing as well.
Awesome, thank you. And Yushi and Vikash have a very similar question, so I'll kind of roll it into one. Do you have any advice for recruiting research participants in different markets?
Yeah, so I normally have a local teams that I work with across different countries. So that's how I normally work. So I will define what we want to find, and knowing the nuances in different countries, I'll make sure that is captured in the brief. And then I will work together with the team to kind of find those people. Some countries easier to find than others. Some countries more formalized. Like in the UK, you have the recruiters to do it. Some countries, they actually, the way they recruit is go to house by house, like go to a village and then say, oh, do you know who have kids with 3 years old and 5 years old, and they would say, oh yeah, who the neighbor next door. So it's a very different way of recruiting. So yeah, you need a local team to help you out on that, and you need to make sure you when you organize that and managing that, you need to kind of foresee what might be coming up, because there are so much nuances can create either you kind of don't find the right people, or you just couldn't find them in time for your research and things like that. So yeah, work with the local teams and make sure you kind of communicate with them very well and what you need as well.
Awesome, thank you so much. So I think that's it for the questions. Thanks, Chui Chui. That was yeah, such an interesting presentation. I'm sure if anyone thinks of any more questions, they can ask you on Twitter, I'm sure, or probably an email. But yeah, no, we have one more presentation left for today, so hopefully see some of you there. And again, thanks Chui Chui, that was fantastic.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks everyone for chipping in. Yeah, get in touch if you have any questions. Thanks, Henry.